In your view, what would a just and lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict look like? Why do you advocate a one-state solution?
Yes. I think that the two-state solution is not working for two reasons. First of all, now in 2025, it's impractical. We have 800,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank, and they don't live in small settlements. They live also in cities and so on. They have turned the West Bank, at least in 60% of the West Bank is now Jewish. So I cannot see where would be the Palestinian state in 40% of the West Bank. God knows what Gaza will be. I don't know, nobody knows. Where will be the Palestinian state? It will be on paper. It will not be a real state. So that's practically. Morally, I also think it's wrong because it only deals with part of Palestine, historical Palestine. The West Bank and the Gaza Strip is only 20% of historical Palestine. And it only caters for the future of part of the Palestinian people. In fact, less than half of the Palestinian people. On top of it, it's very clear that the two-state solution is a reflection of the balance of power, not reflection of justice. So according to the balance of power, it is clear that the Palestinians should get something which is not really a state, maybe a Bantustan, an autonomy.
Like in South Africa.
Like in South Africa. If you don't use the balance of power as the main motive for analyzing what should be the solution, but you use terms such as justice, transitional justice, international law, then you have to agree that in order to afford the Palestinians to have equality, which is the main thing that they are missing, you need to have a democratic state from the river to the sea. In any other structure, the equality is not guaranteed, not to mention the fact that in transitional justice terms, I say transitional justice is what happened, for instance, in post-apartheid South Africa. In terms of reconciling with the past, you need to allow the Palestinian refugees to return, those who want to return. Now,
you're talking about the resolution 194.
Exactly, from 11 of December 1948. If they cannot come back, the conflict will continue. Because the PLO was not born in Israel or even in the West Bank on the Gaza Strip. It was born in the refugee camps of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So you need to have a comprehensive solution. Two states is like a medical solution for the symptoms and not for the illness.
But do you think this idea, one-state solution, is viable or just a dream?
First of all, it's viable, and not just for me. It's not just a dream. I'm part of a movement called the One Democratic State Initiative. We believe that we have a large support among the Palestinians. We know that we don't have a large support among the Israeli Jews, but also people who support the two-state solution now don't have.
Even Norman Finkelstein criticized the one-state solution.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that I'll put it this way: there is already a one state. This has nothing to do with me and you. There is
That's the reality right now.
The reality is a one state with a regime which is not democratic. So this is not a matter of creating a new state. It's a matter of changing the regime. Regime change in history is possible. Creating new states is more difficult. But changing regimes happened all the time in history. And at times even the West believed that the regime should change in East Europe and in some parts. So I believe in regime change. And I believe that the fact that those who want to change the regime are now powerless is not an indication of what they will be able to do in the future. Because what happens in Israel and Palestine depends very much on the world. And the world begins to see what happens with this kind of state that they are now supporting. But it's a slow process of change. I'm an optimist. I think this will happen.
What should happen to have regime change in Israel?
What you need is, first of all, and this is happening, the Israeli society is imploding from within. The civil war, kind of civil war.
Like happened with South Africa.
With South Africa, exactly. So I think this is has to even escalate and I think it will. The economic crisis in Israel is going to deepen. People don't talk about it, but Israel is undergoing a very severe economic crisis and will be totally dependent on America. The United States used to give Israel $3 billion a year. Since 2023, it gives Israel 14 billion dollars a year. Now, even the right wing,
very expensive
baby, and even the right wing in America doesn't like to give that much money, even if it supports
it's impressive.
Israel. Yeah, exactly. So I think that they have a danger that even their main source of finance, which is both the Jewish people and America, are going to think twice whether it's worthwhile continue to invest that much money. And what also has to happen, we know that millions of people in the world support the Palestinians, but governments usually are much less supportive. We need to narrow the gap between the positions of the societies on Palestine and the positions of the government. I do believe that the pressure from below is beginning now to influence the governments of Europe, some governments in Central America. I know Brazil is a funny case where sometimes the government is better than the people when it comes to Palestine, but that's a unique case relatively compared to the rest of the world. And I think this would happen. And also very important to pay attention to two things. One is the change in the way young Jews around the world deal with Israel. Many of them don't want to be associated with Israel. And secondly, we tend to think that the revolution of the Arab world is over because it failed. The revolution in the Arab world has just started. The fact that it was repressed, we know from history. Every revolution has a counter-revolution. But the future of the countries around Israel is not yet determined. And I think in the future, these countries would become much more reflective of their people, and that would include a far more tough position towards Israel, not the normalization that we can see now.
What measures, in your opinion, could immediately bring an end on the ongoing Palestinian genocide? Do you support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement?
Yes, I do support the BDS movement. I think the only way to stop Israel is by very, very strong pressure from the outside. It's possible. And even if the United States is unwilling to do this, Europe has the power to do it, but is afraid to do it. If the EU would impose sanctions on Israel, would stop the special relationship it has with Israel, then, or take measures such as taking the Israeli sport teams out of the European projects and tournaments, I think this is going to at least stop the genocide. I'm not saying that it's going to bring a solution, but at least we would be able to save the life of many Palestinians. Of course, it would be better if it would not be just Europe, if the rest of the world would join Europe, and the best would be if the United States would take such a position. But I'm saying even in the current political constellation, when there's very little hope for the United States to do this, Europe can do this. Europe has the power to do this, but it has politicians that are afraid to do it.
Do you think Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state?
I don't really understand this question about do states have the right to exist, because I think states, most of the states in the world were not born out of the will of the people. So I don't think the problem with states is not whether they have the right to exist or not. The question is, does a regime, a certain regime, has the right to continue to exist or not? So it's a matter of regime and not the states. A regime that is an apartheid regime in South Africa was unacceptable and had no right to continue. A regime that was fascist in Spain or Italy had no right to exist. If we are right in defining the regime currently in Israel as non-democratic, as ethnic, as racist, it has to change. So it's far more important, I think, not to fall to the trap of this question, oh, so Ilan Pappé, you don't recognize the right of Israel to exist. I don't even care if Israel wants to be a Jewish state. It depends, what does it mean? Because for me, a Jewish state would not expel one Palestinian, would not oppress one Palestinian, would ask the Palestinian to accept the Jews as refugees from Europe and integrate them into Palestine. For me, a Jewish state is something very different than for Mr. Netanyahu. We don't have the same notion of what a Jewish state means. So the question is not, does Israel has the right to be a Jewish state? Does Israel has the right to be a racist state, an ethnic state? And I don't think this necessarily is connected to Judaism. I think it's a supremacist, white European state. Something that is, it's very interesting, I think it belongs to the age of colonialism. It's a leftover from the colonialist age. But because of the Holocaust and the special history of Jews in Europe, it remained beyond its historical period. That's a very weird, historians, 300 years from now, when historians would look at this, they would say it's very interesting. Colonialism in many ways came to an end, but there was a leftover that continued. But you can only see it from a very distant future.